brutal truth nobody wants to hear. Right now, as you're listening to this, you might be trapped in a toxic attachment that's slowly destroying your life. And the worst part, you probably don't even realize it. I'm not talking about the obvious red flags everyone warns you about. I'm talking about the subtle, insidious patterns that have become so normal to you that you've forgotten what healthy connection actually feels like. The relationships that drain your energy, diminish your self-worth, and keep you stuck in cycles of pain and confusion. Today, we're going to shine a light on these toxic attachments. We're going to examine the signs, understand the psychology behind them, and most importantly, I'm going to give you the tools to break free. This isn't going to be comfortable. Real growth never is. But if you're ready to reclaim your life and create the relationships you actually deserve, then stay with me. Let's start with what toxic attachments really are. These aren't just bad relationships or difficult people in your life. Toxic attachments are emotional bonds that actively harm your well-being, yet feel impossible to break. They're characterized by an unhealthy dependence that creates more pain than joy, more chaos than peace. Psychologist Dr. John Bowlby, who pioneered attachment theory, showed us that our early relationships create blueprints for how we connect with others throughout our lives. When these blueprints are damaged, we often find ourselves repeatedly drawn to familiar patterns of dysfunction. Consider Sarah, a 32-year-old marketing executive who kept dating men who were emotionally unavailable. Despite her success in every other area of life, she found herself in a 3-year relationship with someone who criticized her constantly, made her question her own perceptions, and left her feeling smaller each day. Yet every time she tried to leave, she felt this overwhelming pull to stay. That's the power of toxic attachment. Or take Michael, whose friendship with his college roommate had become a source of constant stress. This friend would disappear for months, then reappear expecting Michael to drop everything. He'd make promises he never kept, borrowed money he never returned, and somehow always made Michael feel guilty for having boundaries. Yet Michael couldn't bring himself to cut ties completely. These aren't isolated cases. They're patterns that millions of people experience, often without understanding why they keep repeating the same painful cycles. The philosopher Aristotle once said, "When we are what we repeatedly do, when we repeatedly choose toxic connections, we're not just making bad decisions, we're literally rewiring our brains to accept dysfunction as normal. We're training ourselves to mistake intensity for intimacy, chaos for passion, and control for care." The first step to breaking free is recognition. Toxic attachments are masters of disguise. They often masquerade as deep connections, passionate relationships, or loyal friendships. Here are the warning signs that should make you pause and reflect. Sign 1. You feel worse about yourself after interactions. Healthy relationships should generally leave you feeling energized, valued, or at least neutral. Toxic attachments consistently leave you feeling drained, confused, or questioning your own worth. Take the case of Jennifer, who noticed that every conversation with her sister left her feeling inadequate. Her sister had a way of turning every achievement into a criticism, every joy into a comparison. Jennifer would hang up the phone feeling like she'd done something wrong, even when the conversation seemed pleasant on the surface. If you find yourself needing to recover from interactions with someone you're supposedly close to, that's a red flag. Ask yourself, do I feel better or worse about myself after spending time with this person? Sign 2. You're walking on eggshells. When you find yourself constantly monitoring your words, actions, and even thoughts to avoid triggering someone's negative reaction, you've entered toxic territory. This hypervigilance is exhausting and indicates that the relationship dynamic is built on fear rather than mutual respect. Dr. Susan Forward, a renowned psychologist specializing in toxic relationships, explains that this pattern creates a state of chronic stress that can literally rewire your nervous system. You become so focused on managing someone else's emotions that you lose touch with your own needs and boundaries. David experienced this with his business partner. He found himself rehearsing conversations in his head, predicting explosive reactions, and avoiding important topics altogether. The partnership was slowly destroying both the business and David's mental health, yet he felt trapped by their shared history and financial obligations. Sign 3. The relationship operates on extremes. Toxic attachments are characterized by dramatic highs and devastating lows. One day you're the most important person in their world, the next you're ignored or criticized. This emotional whiplash creates an addiction-like cycle where you're constantly chasing the next high. Psychology research shows that intermittent reinforcement, where positive responses are unpredictable, creates some of the strongest behavioral patterns. It's the same mechanism that makes gambling addictive. The uncertainty keeps you hooked, always hoping for the next moment of validation or connection. Lisa's relationship with her mother exemplified this pattern. Some days her mother would call her multiple times, praising her decisions and seeking her advice. Other days, the same mother would be cold, critical, and dismissive. Lisa found herself desperately trying to figure out what she'd done wrong, constantly adjusting her behavior to recreate those moments of approval. Sign 4. You make excuses for their behavior. When you find yourself constantly explaining away someone's harmful actions, minimizing their impact, or taking responsibility for their choices, you've entered dangerous territory. This pattern, often called enabling, not only perpetuates toxic behavior but also erodes your own sense of reality. The Greek philosopher Epictetus taught that we can only control our own actions and responses, not those of others. When we take responsibility for someone else's behavior, we're essentially trying to control the uncontrollable, which leads to frustration and self-blame. Mark noticed this pattern with his teenage son. While setting boundaries was normal, Mark found himself making excuses for increasingly destructive behavior, lying to family members about incidents, and taking personal responsibility for his son's choices. The line between support and enabling had become dangerously blurred. Sign 5. You've lost touch with your own needs and desires. Perhaps the most insidious sign of toxic attachment is the gradual erosion of your own identity. You become so focused on the other person's needs, moods, and reactions that you lose touch with what you actually want and need. This doesn't happen overnight. It's a slow process where you compromise a little here, adjust a little there, until one day you wake up and realize you don't recognize the person you've become. Take Rachel, who realized after ending a 4-year relationship that she couldn't remember what music she actually liked. She'd been listening to her partner's preferences for so long that her own tastes had disappeared. This extended to everything from career choices to friendships to how she spent her free time. Understanding why we get stuck in these patterns is crucial for breaking free. It's not about weakness or poor judgment. There are deep psychological mechanisms at work. Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, a leading trauma researcher, explains that our nervous systems are designed to seek familiar patterns, even when those patterns are harmful. If dysfunction was normal in your early relationships, your nervous system will interpret healthy behavior as foreign and potentially dangerous. This is why leaving toxic attachments often feels terrifying, even when you logically know it's the right choice. Your nervous system is essentially saying, "'Tis familiar pain is safer than that unknown peace." Additionally, trauma bonding creates powerful neurochemical responses. When someone causes you pain and then provides relief, your brain releases a cocktail of stress hormones, followed by bonding chemicals. This creates an intense attachment that can feel stronger than healthy love. Consider the case of Tom, who grew up in a household where love was conditional on performance. His father would be harsh and critical, then occasionally show pride and affection. Tom learned to associate this emotional roller coaster with love itself. As an adult, he found himself drawn to partners and friends who replicated this pattern, feeling bored or suspicious when relationships were consistently kind and stable. Before we move into solutions, let's be clear about what's at stake. Toxic attachments don't just affect your emotional well-being, they impact every area of your life. Physically, chronic stress from toxic relationships can lead to health issues including heart disease, compromised immune function, and sleep disorders. The constant state of hypervigilance takes a toll on your body that shouldn't be underestimated. Mentally, these patterns can lead to anxiety, depression, and a gradual erosion of self-trust. When you're constantly questioning your own perceptions and feelings, you lose the ability to make confident decisions in all areas of life. Professionally, toxic attachments often spill over into work relationships and career choices. The energy you spend managing dysfunction is energy you can't invest in growth and achievement. Socially, toxic attachments tend to isolate you from healthier relationships. Either the toxic person actively sabotages other connections, or you become so exhausted that you withdraw from social opportunities. The philosopher Seneca wrote, "And every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end." Your toxic attachments aren't just affecting your present, they're stealing your future. Every day you remain stuck is a day you're not building the life and relationships you actually want. Before we continue to the solution phase, take some time to honestly examine your own patterns. Get a journal and write down your responses to these questions. Which relationships in my life consistently leave me feeling drained or confused? When do I find myself making excuses for someone else's behavior toward me? What patterns from my past relationships am I repeating in my current ones? How has my sense of self changed in my closest relationships? What would I do differently if I truly believed I deserved healthy, respectful connections? Don't rush through these questions. The answers you discover here will be the foundation for the changes you're about to make. If this content is resonating with you, if you're recognizing patterns you've been avoiding or finding clarity about relationships that have been confusing you, then you're already on the path to transformation. The insights we're exploring here are part of a deeper journey into personal growth and healthy relationships that we dive into regularly on this channel. Consider subscribing, and thanks for joining us. Here's what I want you to understand. You're at a crossroads right now. You can continue living with these toxic patterns, making excuses, hoping things will change on their own. Or you can make the decision to break free and create the relationships and life you actually deserve. The choice is yours, but understand this: these patterns don't fix themselves. They don't improve with time unless you actively work to change them. The dysfunction you're tolerating today will be the same dysfunction you're dealing with next year, 5 years from now, unless you take action. In Part 2, we're going to explore exactly how to break these patterns. We'll cover specific strategies for setting boundaries, recognizing your own worth, and creating healthy attachments. We'll discuss how to handle the inevitable pushback when you start changing these dynamics, and most importantly, how to build the kind of relationships that actually nourish your soul. The journey isn't easy, but it's absolutely possible. You have more power than you realize, and you deserve connections that add to your life rather than subtract from it. Are you ready to reclaim your life? If you've made it this far, you've already done something most people won't do. You face the uncomfortable truth about toxic attachments and recognize patterns that many prefer to ignore. Now comes the real work, the work that will transform your life. Breaking free from toxic attachments isn't about cutting everyone out of your life or becoming cold and disconnected. It's about reclaiming your power, rebuilding your sense of self, and creating space for relationships that actually serve your highest good. Let me be clear, this process will challenge you. The people benefiting from your dysfunction won't make it easy. Your own nervous system will resist change. But on the other side of this discomfort lies a life of authentic connection, inner peace, and genuine self-respect. Step 1. Radical self-awareness. The foundation of breaking free is developing what I call radical self-awareness. This goes beyond simply recognizing toxic patterns. It's about understanding your triggers, your responses, and the unconscious beliefs driving your choices. Dr. Daniel Siegel, a leading psychiatrist and researcher, coined the phrase, "Name it to tame it." When we can accurately identify what's happening in our emotional and mental landscape, we begin to gain power over it instead of being controlled by it. Start by implementing what I call the pause protocol. When you feel that familiar pull toward dysfunction, that urge to excuse bad behavior or compromise your boundaries, pause. Take 3 deep breaths and ask yourself, what am I feeling right now? What am I afraid will happen if I don't respond the way I always have? Consider the case of Amanda, who realized her pattern of immediately apologizing whenever someone was upset with her, even when she'd done nothing wrong. By pausing and examining this response, she discovered it stemmed from a childhood fear of abandonment. Once she understood this, she could choose a different response. Action step: for the next week, carry a small notebook or use your phone to record moments when you feel the pull of toxic patterns. Write down the situation, your emotional response, and what you were afraid would happen if you acted differently. This data will become your roadmap for change. Step 2. Establishing non-negotiable boundaries. Boundaries aren't walls you build to keep people out. They're gates you install to control what you allow in. The philosopher Lao Tzu taught that knowing others is wisdom, knowing yourself is enlightenment. Boundaries are how you demonstrate that self-knowledge. Here's what most people get wrong about boundaries. They think boundaries are about controlling other people's behavior. They're not. Boundaries are about controlling your own responses and protecting your own energy. Let's look at how Marcus transformed his relationship with his demanding boss. Instead of trying to change his boss's unreasonable expectations, Marcus established clear boundaries around his availability. He stopped checking emails after 7 p.m., refused to work weekends except for genuine emergencies, and communicated his limits clearly and professionally. When his boss pushed back, Marcus didn't argue or justify. He simply restated his boundary and followed through with consequences. The result? His boss initially tested the boundary but eventually adjusted expectations. More importantly, Marcus regained control over his life and self-respect. The boundary framework, Identify the behavior. What specific actions or patterns are unacceptable to you? Communicate clearly, state your boundary without justification or apology, and I don't discuss my personal life at work is a boundary. And I'm sorry, but I'm kind of private about my personal stuff is not. Prepare for pushback. Toxic people will test your boundaries. This isn't personal, it's predictable. They've benefited from your lack of boundaries, so they'll try to restore the old dynamic. Follow through with consequences. Boundaries without consequences are just suggestions. If someone continues to violate your boundary, you must be prepared to limit their access to you. Write down 3 boundaries you need to establish this week. Start with the clearest, most obvious ones. Practice stating them out loud until they feel natural. Step 3. The art of detachment. Detachment doesn't mean becoming cold or uncaring. It means freeing yourself from the compulsive need to control, fix, or manage other people's emotions and choices. The Buddhist concept of non-attachment teaches us that suffering comes from our desperate clinging to outcomes we cannot control. Dr. Melody Beattie, who wrote extensively about codependency, explains that detachment is actually the highest form of love, because it allows people to experience the natural consequences of their choices without interference. Take the example of Patricia, whose adult daughter repeatedly made destructive financial decisions and then expected her mother to bail her out. Patricia loved her daughter deeply, but her constant rescuing was preventing her daughter from learning responsibility. Through practicing detachment, Patricia learned to say, "I love you, and I believe you're capable of handling this situation." She stopped providing financial rescue while maintaining emotional support. The key to healthy detachment is distinguishing between caring about someone and being responsible for their choices and consequences. You can love someone deeply while refusing to enable their dysfunction. How to practice detachment. The observer stance. When someone is having an emotional reaction, practice observing rather than absorbing. Their emotions are information about their inner state, not instructions for your behavior. The broken record technique. When someone pushes your boundaries, repeat your position without elaboration. "I've already given you my answer, and my decision remains the same. I'm not going to discuss this further." Emotional regulation. Learn to manage your own emotional state regardless of others' chaos. This might involve breathing exercises, physical movement, or removing yourself from the situation temporarily. Here are some self-reflection questions to ask yourself. Where in my life am I taking responsibility for someone else's emotions or choices? What would happen if I stopped trying to manage or fix this person? How might allowing natural consequences actually help this person grow? Step 4. Rebuilding your sense of self. Toxic attachments often leave you feeling like you've lost yourself. You've compromised so much, adapted so extensively, that you're not sure who you really are anymore. Rebuilding your identity is crucial for creating healthy relationships going forward. The existentialist philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre argued that existence precedes essence, meaning we create ourselves through our choices and actions. Every day, through your decisions and responses, you're either reinforcing old patterns or creating new ones. Start by reconnecting with your authentic preferences, values, and desires. This sounds simple, but for many people it's genuinely challenging. Consider Robert, who realized after ending a long-term friendship that he had no idea what he actually enjoyed doing for fun. He'd spent years going along with his friends' interests, adapting to their schedule and suppressing his own preferences. His journey back to himself started small. He spent a weekend alone, trying different activities and paying attention to what genuinely sparked his interest. Here is an identity reconstruction exercise. Set aside time for these reflection questions. Write your answers without censoring or judging. What activities make me lose track of time in the best possible way? What values are truly non-negotiable for me? What dreams did I abandon to accommodate someone else's comfort? When do I feel most authentically myself? What would I do if I knew no one would judge or leave me for my choices? Each day, make at least one choice based purely on your authentic preference, not on what you think others want or expect. Step 5. The courage to let go. Here's the hardest truth sometimes. Breaking free from toxic attachments means ending relationships entirely. Not every relationship can be salvaged through boundaries and communication. Some patterns are so entrenched, so destructive, that the only healthy choice is complete separation. This doesn't make you selfish or cruel. It makes you someone who values your own well-being enough to make difficult choices. As the Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius wrote, confine yourself to the present. You cannot sacrifice your present and future well-being for past connections that no longer serve you. Let me share the story of Catherine, who finally ended a 20-year friendship that had become entirely one-sided. Her friend would call only during crises, expecting immediate support, but was never available when Catherine needed help. The friendship had devolved into Catherine being an unpaid therapist with no reciprocal care. The decision to end it was painful, but it freed up emotional energy that Catherine redirected into relationships that were mutual and nurturing. How to practice letting go, grieve the loss. Even toxic relationships involve real attachment. Allow yourself to feel sad about what you hoped the relationship could have been. Accept reality. Stop waiting for the person to change or the relationship to improve. Accept what is, not what you wish it could be. Focus on your future. Redirect the energy you've been spending on dysfunction toward building the life and relationships you actually want. Write a letter to yourself from the perspective of who you'll be 1 year after freeing yourself from this toxic attachment. What does that future self want you to know? Step 6. Cultivating healthy attachments. Breaking free from toxic patterns isn't just about what you stop doing. It's about what you start creating. Healthy relationships have entirely different characteristics than the dysfunction you've been tolerating. Psychologist Dr. Sue Johnson, who developed emotionally focused therapy, identifies secure attachment as characterized by accessibility, responsiveness, and emotional engagement. In healthy relationships, people are emotionally available, respond to each other's needs, and maintain their individual identities while creating connection. Notice how different this is from toxic attachments, which are characterized by unpredictability, emotional manipulation, and the loss of self. Characteristics of healthy attachments: consistency. The person's behavior toward you is relatively stable and predictable. Mutual respect. Both people honor each other's boundaries and individuality. Growth-oriented. The relationship encourages both people to become their best selves. Emotional safety. You can express your authentic thoughts and feelings without fear of attack or abandonment. Reciprocity. Both people contribute to and benefit from the relationship. Start by being the kind of person you want to attract. Model the behavior you hope to see. Practice emotional regulation, maintain your boundaries, and show up authentically in your interactions. Here are the action steps for building healthy connections. Quality over quantity. Focus on developing a few deep, meaningful relationships rather than many superficial ones. Slow building. Allow relationships to develop naturally over time. Healthy attachment builds gradually through consistent, positive interactions. Mutual investment. Look for people who invest in the relationship as much as you do. Notice reciprocity in communication, planning, and emotional support. If you're finding value in this deeper exploration of relationship dynamics and personal growth, drop a comment below. I would love to hear from you. How do you integrate all of this? Change is a process, not an event. You'll have setbacks, you'll question yourself, you might even temporarily return to old patterns. This doesn't mean you've failed, it means you're human. Dr. James Prochaska's research on behavior change shows that people typically cycle through stages multiple times before lasting change occurs. Expect this process to be nonlinear and be compassionate with yourself along the way. Here are 4 practical steps. Create accountability. Share your journey with a trusted friend, therapist, or support group. External accountability increases your likelihood of following through. Celebrate small wins. Acknowledge every moment you choose healthy responses over old patterns. These small victories build momentum. Plan for setbacks. Identify your most vulnerable moments and create specific strategies for handling them. What will you do when you feel lonely? When the toxic person reaches out? When you start doubting your decision? Regular check-ins. Schedule weekly time to assess your progress. Are you maintaining your boundaries? Staying connected to your authentic self? Building healthy relationships? Your new beginning. The ancient Chinese philosopher Confucius said, "The man who moves a mountain begins by carrying away small stones." Your mountain might feel overwhelming right now, but every boundary you set, every toxic pattern you refuse to engage with, every authentic choice you make is moving you toward freedom. Remember, you didn't create these patterns overnight, and you won't undo them immediately. But every day you choose health over dysfunction, authenticity over people-pleasing, and self-respect over external validation, you're writing a new story for your life. The person you're becoming through this process, someone with clear boundaries, authentic relationships, and unshakable self-worth, that person is already inside you. You're not becoming someone new, you're returning to who you really are beneath all the adaptation and compromise. To recap, choose one toxic pattern you will no longer tolerate. Draw a line in the sand. Identify one person in your life who represents healthy connection. Invest more energy in that relationship. Create a daily practice that reconnects you with your authentic self, whether that's journaling, meditation, creative expression, or simply spending time alone. Write down your vision for the relationships you want to create. Be specific about how you want to feel and be treated. The road ahead isn't easy, but it leads to something beautiful. Relationships that energize rather than drain you, connections based on mutual respect rather than dysfunction, and most importantly, a relationship with yourself that's built on love rather than criticism. You have everything you need to break free from toxic attachments and create the life you deserve. The only question now is, are you ready to do the work? Your transformation starts the moment you decide it does. Today can be day one of your new life. The choice, as always, is yours.